Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manupastam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Upakaramayam Dhanati Swavadantikam. Namam Vishnupada Krishnavasa Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitya Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Govani Pachayane Nivishesha Srinivasi Paschata Dishatari Panchakapa Ruvesha Kipa Sinivevata Paritanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pavanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Go Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, welcome to our second and last session on the topic of devotee care based on mentorship. So yesterday we opened up the whole topic and I tried from different angles of vision to establish the need for these sheltering relationships and also to eventually give shelter, and because otherwise our relationships are not deep and meaningful, they are hurry-bol relationships, as I called them yesterday. So before we move on to the main topic of the qualities we need to have to give shelter, I do want to add one more little point which again, makes it even firmer that without being sheltered, we cannot really make advancement. And in order to understand that, let's remember the importance of service attitude. That to develop a genuine, selfless service attitude is of the greatest importance in our devotional development. That we serve with heart and soul, Satatam Kirti Anduma, Yatanta Sadritavata, always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination. So this actually describes very nicely the service mood, that we have to endeavor, we have to give our best. And then that kind of service mood attracts Krishna's merciful glance. He will reveal himself more and more to a devotee who serves like that, right? So good to remember, realizations are revealed by Krishna. They're not coming simply through studies or something, but no, Krishna shows himself to a devotee who sincerely endeavors to please him. So now the crunch is that to actually serve with heart and soul, we can only do that when we are sheltered. When we are not sheltered, we will not give everything in service. We will be holding back. We will be saying or thinking, oh, hang on, where am I here in the game? Because when we give our heart, we always put ourselves in the vulnerable position. Yes. So we will maybe serve with 5% or maximum 10%, but not with 95% of endeavor and energy. We hold back. Because also, as I hinted already yesterday, a person who does everything, serves nicely, he easily or she gets given more and more service, so very easily we get overloaded, and we may be afraid of that, and that's why we also may hold back. So yes, but when we hold back, then Krishna will simply not be attracted to that kind of service mood. He will not reciprocate, he will not reveal himself. Yes, and we will not get that taste, that deep satisfaction at heart. That's actually how Krishna reciprocates, that he gives us this deep satisfaction at heart. But if we just serve with a minimum effort, then this will not come. and then we will be hovering around a lower level of devotional life. That we do something, but there's no taste and no realizations, and our faith doesn't grow, therefore, because Krishna doesn't reveal himself. So therefore we don't feel inspired to serve, and actually Krishna consciousness becomes boring, right? Yes. And then people very easily leave. You know, they feel, oh, well, I've tried it, yeah, it doesn't work for me, you know. Yes. And the root cause of this vicious circle is, again, that we are not properly sheltered. But if we are sheltered, if we have a mentor, as we yesterday introduced, who has no managerial interest, his only interest is our spiritual journey and development, then we feel safe, you know, and we have somebody in our life who looks out for us, that our practice is balanced, that we don't get overloaded with service, that we also get some time out to go to the holy dam or go on a retreat or some event and have a little break and all this. Yes, and if we, you know, start feeling a little overloaded, well, then we have somebody to turn to, you know, and that then ideally the mentor should connect with the managers and say, hey, this person needs a bit of a break, he's doing too much, he doesn't have time to read or come to the morning program and all that, you know. Yeah, so, and then we are secure, we feel protected, we feel safe, that we can actually serve with heart and soul. And if we serve with heart and soul, very quickly bhakti develops. But only then. That's the whole thing. You know, if we hold back and just do something little, this will not generate bhakti, you know. Krishna wants to see how much we sacrifice ourselves, you know, yes. And also we have the saying, Krishna sees not what we offer, but what we hold behind our back for us, you know. I think there may be somebody who wants to get in. I hear some noises. So in any case, yeah, that's another good reason why we need to be sheltered, you know, so that we can actually give our everything in service, and then Krishna reveals himself, and then our devotional life really takes off, you know, and we get a taste and deep satisfaction and realizations and so many things, you know. Yes. And I mean, of course, in many devotees' lives, this is going on informally. I mean, when I think back of my devotional life, I always had such a person in my life because I needed it, you know, I was looking for it. Yes, yes. So if we look for it and, you know, then, and if we are sheltered, then we can give ourselves to the process wholeheartedly. And then we make very quickly advancement, you know. Yes. Okay, so I simply wanted to add that. And now I want to move on to the today's topic, the qualities required to be able to give shelter. So once again, this topic is very important. I have also a whole session, qualities required to be eager for shelter, but we don't have time for this. Yeah, so the two main reasons why this is so important is that first of all we know what to look for, right? Yes, because otherwise we may be disappointed, you know, if we take shelter of a person who is not so qualified. And also that eventually we understand what we should develop, so that one day we can be a shelter giver, you know. Yeah. But we will discover that actually it is quite a high level of commitment and advancement in order to really give shelter to others, you know. It's not such a cheap thing, you know. So the first and foremost qualification is that we have to be sheltered ourselves, right? So we can only give something to others which we have ourselves, yes. And this is often overlooked, you know? Often senior devotees think, oh yeah, I have Prabhupada and my guru and so on. No, but Prabhupada is not going to come and pull your ear there, you know? No, he's not. So we need a person there, you know? Yes. Yes, and I mean, we can imagine what would be the result if our shelter giver, our mentor, does not have a mentor himself. So, you know, he may get into some situations where he actually needs guidance himself, right? Because serving as a mentor is also something we have to learn. But also when the mentees see something which looks a little inappropriate in their mentor, they have nowhere to go if our mentor doesn't have a mentor, right? Yes, but if he has a mentor, and he meaning if one has a mentor, not he in opposition to she. So if he has a mentor, then we know, we can report to him, right? Yes. But if he doesn't have a mentor, then where can we go? And who will correct him? Yeah, yes. Yeah, because it's not such an easy thing, and very easily once we ourselves as a mentor, we can lose our balance and we get, you know, too involved in people's lives or too much controlling or this or that, you know. So we need somebody who can also correct us, you know, apart from the fact that we should walk our talk. So if we tell everybody that people should have a mentor, then we ourselves have to set that example of having one, you know. Yeah, so that's the first and foremost condition, that we have to be sheltered ourselves. And depending on how firmly we are sheltered, we proportionally, we can, you know, be effective in giving shelter to others, you know. Yes. So, and then we have a whole other list of things, so let us go through this. Some are pretty self-explanatory, some can be unpacked more. But usually, again, for this whole session, I usually use 2.5, 3 hours, you know, so we'll just go through it. So, and actually, let me also explain this. This list I didn't come up with. It actually is in Niranjana Swami's book, Taking Care of Krishna's Devotees. I added something to it, and he also didn't make up the list, but he got it off a little booklet of His Holiness Varna Swami. So it comes in the parampara of devotee care and mentorship preaching, you know. So should have a nice understanding of the philosophy and practice of Krishna consciousness. So philosophy and practice. And it's not that a mentor has to be a good speaker, a good preacher, a good class giver or something. No, no need. But he should have a nice understanding of the philosophy, you know, and also of the practice, how to apply it, how to actually live it, you know, not just armchair philosopher. Can you give him a handout too? Not just an armchair philosopher here, you know, but actually also applying it, right? So the next one is really stretchable, and I accepted the very same wording, and I dare say it's on purpose so worded so in a stretchable way. Should have been active within ISKCON for a reasonable length of time, which doesn't say anything. What's a reasonable length of time, you know? So I dare say it is purposefully worded like this because you can't put a time frame on it. You can't say should be have been in ISKCON 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. No, it depends. It's a very individual thing how the person applies him or herself, you know. So that has to be judged very individually. Reasonable length of time. But should have been active within ISKCON, not passive. You know, because some people, they may be a part of ISKCON, but in a very passive way. But no, active, you know, involved, doing service, coming to the programs, and should be able to give balanced advice according to time, place, and circumstances. So of course that is pretty important because a mentor, you know, one of his functions is that he has to help people balance things, you know. Yes. What do we have to be in order to give balanced advice?
Balanced ourselves.
Exactly. We have to be balanced, right? If our own life and practice is imbalanced, we can't really give balanced advice, you know. Yes, exactly. And also it is of course helpful if a mentor has had some experience in all the different aspects of devotional service, you know. Yes. If he's been in the kitchen cooking, you know, and offering Sunday feast, if he's been on the altar, if he's been on the street, you know, distributing books, and so solid, you know, variegated training is of course very helpful, you know. And I mean that was really the mood in the early days, that, you know, when a person comes to the temple, especially when we joined the ashram, and in the early days everybody was immediately encouraged to join the ashram unless you had family and kids or something. And then you were going through all the different departments, you know, serving here, serving there, and only later we were specializing in something, you know. Yeah, so that is helpful for a mentor, you know, if he knows what it means to be on the street and distribute books, or to be on the altar, or to be in the kitchen, and you know. Yeah, then we can relate to it and so on, you know. Should not have the tendency for taking extreme and controversial positions on issues. Should not be a fundamentalist with Kanishta mentality, fanaticism. Yes. So that is a situation of being imbalanced, actually, you know, when we have this tendency of taking extreme and controversial position on things, you know, then we are not balanced. And, well, I also discovered that very often, can you give him a hand out? That very often it is connected with a false ego when people tend to take extreme positions, you know, that they want to be different, and I think like this about it. You know, it's very connected with the false ego, trying to show off how we are different than everybody else, and we are the only ones who understand what Prabhupada wanted and all this, you know. Yes. And of course, if such a person would be a mentor, then very easily he attracts people who have the same tendencies. And then you have a whole parampara of fanaticism and extremists there, you know, which is not so helpful, of course, you know. Yes. And I mean, yeah, this fanaticism, I'm describing that in the false ego book, it's really a false ego thing, you know. Yeah, like any good thing in Krishna consciousness, if we use it in order to bring attention to ourselves, how good we are, that we recognize this, it gets contaminated, and then we become fanatics, you know. Like, for example, let's say Harinam book distribution. All these things are so essential, so valuable. But if we start thinking, I'm the only one who knows how to please Prabhupada, it's by distributing books, it's Harinam Sankirtan, nothing else counts, then we become fanatics, and the best idea is contaminated and poisoned through the false ego, Unfortunately, almost every temple has a few fanatics. I mean, here, I once heard a nice definition of His Holiness Radha Swami. He said, when your enthusiasm is not guided by a higher intelligence than your own, then you easily become a fanatic, right? Because our enthusiasm in our conditioned state is not pure. There's a good portion of false ego and passion in it. So, and if that enthusiasm, which is very nice that we have at all some enthusiasm, but it's not pure, so it has to be guided by a higher intelligence than our own, otherwise we can easily become fanatics. Yes. And people who have that tendency, not suitable for serving as a mentor. Yes. And also in this category, I like to take this tendency of canvassing for one's own guru. This is unfortunately also in some parts of the world quite common, that my guru is the best, and because he's my guru, that's why I'm the next best. Again, false ego even entering this sublime relationship between guru and disciple and contaminates it. Yeah, the false ego basically uses it to bring attention to himself. Yes, I am the best because he's my guru and he's so special, and that's why I'm also so special. Yeah, and everybody should take initiation of my guru. And indirectly, we are actually trying to increase our control over people. Because if devotees are all my god brothers and god sisters, and I'm the senior one, I can extend my control and power over people here, So, should not, people who have these tendencies should not serve as a mentor, But we have to understand, we are Prabhupada's family, so who is the Diksha Guru who connects us? It's not the main and foremost one, and it's everybody's private thing, and we don't need to interfere there and canvas and push and all that. So next one, should be mature and sober. So that's pretty self-explanatory, we should be mature, steady, sober, not whimsical, up and down. One day super enthusiastic, one day, no enthusiasm. But sober, mature, experienced, and so on. Yes. Next one is a pretty compact one. Should demonstrate a good standard of sadhana, etiquette, behavior, and commitment to serving the mission of Srila Prabhupada. Yes, let's first understand the importance of setting a good example. This is actually how we serve other devotees, by being exemplary. So as a mentor or any more senior and influential devotee, it's our duty, our service to be exemplary for others. What would Krishna consciousness be if we wouldn't see any good examples around us? So good examples give faith in the process. Yes. And it inspires to also be exemplary and follow strictly and all this. So let me ask you, why is it important to be exemplary and a good standard of sadhana?
So you're not hypocritical.
Hmm?
So you're not hypocritical.
So you're not hypocritical,
Leading by example.
leading by example.
If you're giving someone your mentee and then they see that, then they'll get thrown off and they'll become also a bad example.
Okay, they easily follow bad example. What else?
So your words actually have some potency.
Your words have some potency, yes. But also, our sadhana is the source of our spiritual strength, you know? So if we have good sadhana, then there's more chance that we have a spiritual vision on things, you know? That we don't get muddled up there or emotionally involved, or, you know? So if we have good sadhana, then we have a clear vision of things, you know, and we can detect all kinds of imbalances in others and so on, you know. Yeah, so it's a source of our spiritual strength. Yeah. Then etiquette, social conduct. That's of course a whole big topic in itself, you know. But yeah, etiquette in so many different ways. Our behavior towards seniors, towards children, towards elders, towards the other gender especially. You know, this is often, especially here in America, you know, or in the Western world in general, where all the free mixing is happening. It's often difficult for devotees to accept that this is not favorable for devotional life, you know, when we freely mingle. And yeah, I mean, sometimes people find this difficult to accept, but what can I say? It's, in Krishna consciousness, there is not much room for friendship amongst men and women who are not married. It's just the way it is. Sometimes in the Western world, when people hear this, they're shocked. What? What is this? You know? Yeah, but sorry, you know, it's butter and fire. Doesn't matter whether it's saffron butter or yellow butter or white butter or old or young butter or married butter or not married butter. Well, butter is butter, fire is fire. Same with fire also. Old, young, fire. Married, unmarried, fire. It's fire. Yes, we should not think that we are beyond this, you know. Yes. And I guess this is probably one reason also why we have such a high divorce rate. It usually always starts with not following the etiquette. That people are too loose and liberal in their ways of association, you know, and then often the husband runs off with the best friend of the wife, you know, because she was always around and made friends with her friend's husband, you know, or the other way around. The wife runs off with the best friend of her husband. I've seen it so many times. I've warned people about it, and then 1 year later, oh, here we go. They're running off. You know? It's just butter and fire, you know. So, and sometimes we have to go through the school of hard knocks until we accept it, you know. But especially also as a mentor, you know, if we keep, or as a preacher, if we keep our personal life pure, then, you know, our knife has a sharper edge here to cut in our preaching, you know. But if we, you know, are all liberal and play around and, oh, it's okay, it's cool, and we're in the modern days, and yeah, then, you know, because let's be clear, there is also subtle sex life. It's not all just gross, you know, it's subtle there. So as soon as we enjoy, on a very subtle platform, we enjoy the attention or association of the other gender, that's already subtle sex life. Oh yes, you enjoy on the subtle platform, you know, even if it is with laughing and joking and this and that. No, you know. And it takes a little bit of purification to detect this, you know. In the beginning stage, as a younger devotee, we may think, oh, it's okay, you know, everybody's doing it, you know, and we may all have all these habits from our non-devotional life, and we think it's all right to just chat around and laugh and joke with the other gender. But now, as we get more purified, we realize, oh, this is inappropriate, actually, and the subtle sex life there. And if we invite these things in our life, yeah, then, you know, our consciousness just doesn't have that purity and so on. So anybody who actually really wants to, you know, do something in Krishna consciousness and preach and be instrumental in helping others in their spiritual life, they should keep their own spiritual practice pure as possible, you know. And therefore we keep our association with the other gender to a bare minimum. Just what is necessary to discuss the service or something, you know, but not really more than that, you know. Especially if one is in one community, you know. I mean, I'm moving every week, you know, so Rolling Stone doesn't gather any moss, as we say. But if you're in the same community, day in, day out, you know, like here, big brahmachari ashram, big brahmacharini ashram, ooh, there has to be a strict separation, even on the subtle levels, you know. Otherwise, atmosphere gets contaminated. Yeah, atmosphere gets contaminated. So, good as a mentor, you know, to be clear in this and set the right example, you know. Yes. I mean, it's interesting, when I was in Dallas, I was having a house program with a whole bunch of students there, and we were talking about similar topics, and when I mentioned this, you know, they were all shocked. Oh, what, you know, we have our friends and students, you know, that's where it usually starts, the whole mingling, you know, at the universities. Even India, Bangladesh, you can see, you know, Bangladesh, where it starts is universities, you know. So, but then it was interesting, then I said to them, because they were all unmarried, so I said to them, so just imagine you are married, and your wife has some friendship with some other Prabhu there, you know, and texts him with smileys, and, you know, how would you feel, you know? And then they said, oh yeah, of course, when we are married, that's different. So I said, well, you know, what's the difference? If you have now these habits, just getting married, and then you're going to break your friendships there because you're married? No, then you will say, oh, how can I? I've been associating with this person for 5-10 years. Or now I can't talk to him anymore, you know. So no, it doesn't matter. But it was interesting, you know. As an unmarried student, they all think it's normal. But then when they imagine, yeah, when I'm married, no, I wouldn't want my wife to you know, message some other Prabhu there with hearts and smileys. And the same the other way around, you know. The wife wouldn't want to have her husband there chatting with some ladies and all this, you know. So then it becomes more clear, you know. But while we are unmarried, we think, oh, well, it's all cool and normal, you know. Yes. Yeah, well, when you preach these things, you can't expect to be always popular, you know. But I don't mind. And yes, commitment to, you know, demonstrate a good standard of commitment to serving the mission of Srila Prabhupada. So this is also a topic, you know, that yes, we have to be committed to Prabhupada's mission, Prabhupada's ISKCON, Prabhupada was saying, ISKCON is my body, and he himself is the soul of that body. So, there has to be some integrity there, that we don't play around, this Radhakund Babaji and that thing, and it all goes and no problem. But no, we stick to Prabhupada's mission, which doesn't mean we are not respecting other Vaishnavas or something, But for ourselves, it should be clear, Yes. So it's all about setting the example, Actually, there's one purport, I think it's in the 5th canto, where Prabhupada says, a non-envious person is strict with himself and he can be liberal with others. So that's an interesting point, that often when people are only strict with themselves, but they can't, they can't be liberal with others or accept where they are and uplift them, then this can also be a sign of envy, that you hammer everybody there, and yes. So being strict with oneself, and especially to newcomers, we can be also liberal and accommodating. Yes. Before we continue with the last few, let me see if there's so far any questions or points of discussion, that we don't just go through them all, but yes, Phil?
Well, with that last point that you're making, like being strict with oneself and liberal with others, when it comes to the point of, I can see it with new people, but when it comes to the point of like sometimes basic points in Krishna consciousness, like the 4 regular principles or like 16 rounds or things like that, if devotees, sometimes they try to like make excuses or something like that. I guess it has to do with maybe having good sheltering relationships, because then you could just tell their mentor or something about that. But sometimes it's happened that like some devotees just don't want to do something, and they're experienced, they've been around for a while, and it's not necessarily like envy of them, but they're just like, no, this is the standard, this is a very basic thing, what's the question of not doing it?
Yeah. Rather than trying to push them and force things on people, then better to see how we can uplift in them, how we can inspire them to rise. That maybe their practice is not balanced, and therefore they're not getting enough spiritual strength, like for example the principles or something. So if you stay up late and you're wasting time there in the evenings on internet, and then you're tired in the morning, you can't chant properly, well then not surprising that people get weak, So I dare say it's always a question of looking a little deeper, why this person is like that. Or he hangs out with the wrong people who talk nonsense all day, who talk about sense enjoyment or whatever, So I dare say many things can be fixed just by looking deeper at the person's life and practice, and then balance it. And that's exactly why people need a mentor, because Shiksha Diksha gurus, they're not there, they can't see, and even if the person reports to his guru, well, we said yesterday, as long as we have material desires and attachments, we can't even objectively assess ourselves. So your report may sound really cool and good, but maybe somebody else would write a different report about you, So yeah, that's why mentors should have the opportunity to actually really see a person's practice, whether it's balanced, because so much depends on the right balance. Not too much of this, not too little of that, but it all has to be nicely balanced, you know. And I think with that we can adjust a lot of things and actually help a person. You know, sometimes things are, the reasons are very sort of almost insignificant and detailed, you know, if a person eats a heavy meal in the evening, oh well, that can put your whole spiritual life out of place, you know, because it's the whole domino effect. One thing affects another thing, you know. So yeah. So yeah, I think one can, you know, rather than just forcing things, oh, you have to do this, and oh, you don't, you know, make people feel bad that they can't follow or something. We have to help them to balance their practice so they have the spiritual strength, you know. Like that. What else? Yeah.
On the same point, you mentioned that this is a sign of envy. Can you please elaborate on that?
Well, it's Prabhupada saying, not me, I'm just repeating. Yeah, when we are strict with ourselves, you know, we set the example. But then when we cannot be a little accommodating with others who can't be as strict yet, yeah, it is some sort of a subtle envy there, because maybe we would also like to sleep in and all this, you know, and oh, he is doing it and I can't, and then I get on his case and I can't be accommodating and liberal with him, you know, because actually we also would like to do this. Or when a person mingles too much with the other gender, and then we heavy him all out. Oh, well, maybe we also would like to mingle with the other gender, and we think, oh, it's not fair, you know, he's doing it and I can't, you know. So it's all pretty subtle, you know. Let's continue. We've got only a few more minutes. Should be willing to extend him or herself to help others and have a spirit, the spirit of sacrifice. Should be compassionate and have a genuine and selfless concern for the welfare of devotees. So this is almost one of the most important ones, because if we have that mood, then we will want to follow the other ones too. You know, if we really have this burning and genuine concern for other devotees, and we want to sacrifice ourselves to uplift them and help them, then we will want to be exemplary in our behavior and our sadhana. We will do anything just to be able to serve devotees like that, right? And yeah, let's be clear, being a mentor is not a service for Saturday afternoon from 3 to 5 or something, you know, but you have to be available almost at all times, you know, yes. Yeah, we have to be willing to sacrifice. As we said yesterday, 200 gallons of blood it takes to nourish one devotee, you know. So it's a sacrifice, you know. Yes, and there's nothing worse than, you know, having a mentor where we know he's got no time for me, he's not available, you know. Yes, very discouraging. You will not feel encouraged to go and reveal your mind or something, because he's got no time anyway, and, you know, not available, you know. Yes. So it's quite, yeah, one has to sacrifice, you know. But that's actually what it means to be a madhyam, you know, that we don't only think of ourselves, but that we are reaching out and we are willing to sacrifice ourselves for others. Yes. And of course, saying this also means we may have to set some boundaries, you know, because sometimes The sacrifice has to be done with spiritual intelligence. Sometimes people may only want our attention, they're attention seekers. So then we may have to say, okay, I think we talked about it enough now, so let's get into action, and let's do some service here. Or I explained it, you make your decision, because mentorship doesn't mean we spoon feed people with solutions or something, but we help people to see from different angles, and then they have to make their decisions and take responsibility for them, If we just tell people what to do, people become lazy and they blame you. Oh, my mentor said I should do like this. No spoon feeding solutions here. This is not how a good mentor serves, but simply helping the person to see things from all different angles, like Krishna does too. If you do like this, you get this result. If you do like that, you get that result. So now you decide, So mentor also serves like that, and then we can't reject our mentee just because he makes a decision which we don't find so good or something. Often mentors get too possessive over people, and if they decide differently, okay, I'm not going to talk to you anymore, and look for another mentor and others. So that is, of course, pretty immature, Yeah, I mean, there's so much more to say about it, but we don't really have the time now. Should be a good listener, able to listen to people she is trying to serve, and be a good communicator. Yes. Those can be so discouraging, if people can't hear properly, they're not good listeners. And I mean, there's whole separate seminars on empathic listening and but even little things like always looking at your watch, that makes the person feel he's got no time for me, he's actually too busy, yes. Or answering the phone, I have to take this call, just hang on a minute, So now, when we speak to people, we have to give them our undivided attention, and everything else, phone is switched off. Nothing else is important now, but just being there for that person. And usually it's nice to give as much time as the person needs, So, all right, we may have to calculate sometime. Usually I calculate an hour for a person. If somebody wants to come and see me, I calculate an hour. And I let them know if an hour is not enough, we can meet again. But a person really feels you've got time for them. Because this is one thing, these days, nobody's got time, Everybody's busy with their own thing. Even just, I especially noticed that during pandemic, when I couldn't travel as fast as I was usually doing, and I was staying for 4 or 5 weeks in one community, it's almost a full-time service just to have time for people to hear them. Yes, because everybody's running, nobody's got time to hear people and talk to them, And that's what the old folks should do, who can't run anymore. No, seriously. Yeah, they should guide and reach out and have time to hear and give encouragement and all that. Yes. Should be stably situated within his or her own ashram. This is a really important one, almost as important as being sheltered ourselves, that we have to be stably situated in our ashram. And we can take the next one with it because it belongs to that. Should have healthy and appropriate ways of fulfilling financial, emotional, and managerial needs, and thus never exploit his or her dependents for those needs. So in other words, when we are not stably situated in one of the ashrams, then most likely there are unfulfilled needs there, right? Like if a man is not married, but he's also not a brahmachari, well, why is he not a brahmachari? Because there's some needs. But unless he's married, those needs are not fulfilled. So then, yeah, not so good to serve as a mentor, you know, because very easily we fulfill our needs within that mentor-mentee relationship. Yeah, it's especially also like that for ladies who are not married, because then very often there's unfulfilled emotional needs. And then when a woman with emotional needs serves as a mentor, then very easily she fulfills her own emotional needs in that relationship, right? Yes, it has happened quite a few times in communities where they promote the mentorship system, you know. Yes, and then maybe that lady will discourage her mentees to get married, because then she loses them as source of emotional fulfillment, right? You understand? Yes. Yes. So that's why, yeah, we should be clearly situated in one of the ashrams. And we may even be married and still our emotional needs may not be fulfilled. Often the husbands are not so good at it, and they have to learn how to fulfill the emotional needs of a woman. So, and if there's unfulfilled emotional needs, even though one may be married, then also it can lead to that, you know. And simply then our, you know, mentorship is not pure anymore, because in a subtle way we fulfill our own needs. It's not completely selfless. And then easily it gets muddled up there, you know. Same thing is also with financial dealings. For example, as a mentor, let's say a person is a grihasta, has a business, and he might think, oh, I'm doing my mentee a favor by employing him in my business. But then very easily, you know, there's different needs we invite into the relationship, because then there's some financial dependence there, right? So let's say the person has a Govinda's restaurant and his mentee is cooking, but he has maybe trouble following the 4 principles. He went back to smoking. So how can he tell his mentor about that? He will be afraid that he will not be allowed to cook anymore and loses his job, you know? Yes. Or the mentor cannot really instruct him more firmly because he's afraid, or if my mentee doesn't like it, he will quit, and then, oh, I don't have a cook or something, you know? Yeah, so better to keep the mentorship relationship purely about mentorship and not combine them with some other business relationships or financial dealings or lending money and all these things. This can really spoil the whole mentorship relationship, you know. Better to just focus on that and not invite other dependencies there, you know. Yes. And of course, yeah, here in the list is not confidentiality in it. I usually mention it in the section of be a good listener, able to listen to people and be a good communicator. So there I usually also stress this point that we have to keep things confidential. That's so important, so important. Otherwise we lose the trust, you know, of a mentee if we don't keep things confidential, you know. Trust has to be earned, you know. And if we don't behave properly and we don't keep things confidential, we lose the trust. Okay, any concluding questions? Sorry that we have to rush through this, but at least it gives you some idea, at least it brings a little bit of attention to this topic, and I hope that people read the book, the Sheltering Relationship book, and you know. Any concluding questions? Yes.
Anyone else have any questions? I don't want to hog.
Oh, go ahead.
So I'm just wondering, in areas where this has been implemented, it seems like it would be hard to implement this, because you're saying like the mentors need so much time, so much sacrifice, but if there's a whole community and they have to run a temple and different kinds of things going, just how does it work? Unless there's like, it seems like the need for a large scale community, say 100, 200 devotees, you need to have quite a few mentors, and
Yeah.
who knows if there'd be that many people that are really having all these qualities and having the time. And I just wanted to hear kind of practically how is it working out in places like you mentioned, I think in Ukraine or somewhere, or Narendra Maharaj and other places.
Yeah, I mean, Narendra Maharaj has been preaching this tirelessly for over 20 years. And this of course now in the war everything has changed. But before the war they had 2 times a year counselor retreat, you know, where all the mentors and the aspiring mentors come together for a long weekend, and they have all seminars, and there's one Grihastha couple from Chaupadi, Sridham Prabhu and Kishori Mataji. They've been traveling quite widely, in Europe at least, and they promote this also and give seminars and presentations on it and so on. You know, so it's a whole thing. You actually, if you want to take it seriously, you have to create a whole culture. It's almost, I like to compare it with book distribution, you know. Unless you constantly have some talk about it and some book distribution festivals, and very easily it fizzes out, you know. So you constantly have to bring attention to it, you know. And then, I mean, like Chaupadi, Narendra Swami got the idea from Chaupadi. And there's many devotees who are professionals, they're doctors and lawyers, and they're mentors. Yeah, and they just make that time. They do. And as I mentioned already, I think, you know, the mentorship has to be based on a weekly program. You know, then it becomes very natural. If people want to see you privately, they just come up afterwards, or Prabhu, can I talk to you? Can we make an appointment? You know. When there is a weekly program in your mentor's home, you know. And yeah, I mean, as I said yesterday in the book, I'm explaining very practically how to start, you know, because now you have a list of qualifications. So, and you simply scan your congregation and see who could possibly fit into this, you know, even if they're not exemplary in all regards, but we have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's like having children. When you take it seriously, the parenting, you have to shape up. You have to start setting a good example, you know. So mentorship, same thing, or preacher also, you have to be exemplary, you know. So, and then you have a sangha amongst them, you know. Once a week you meet, and prasadam can be kept simple, you know. In Indian devotees, they always like to have this huge feast, you know, in the house program. So then it becomes too hard to maintain. But if it's the prasadam simple and not longer than 90 minutes, you know, people can make that time. They spend so much time unnecessarily with other stuff, with non-devotee relatives and internet and so many things people do, you know. So like that, they have to become good time managers and simply understand the need for this, you know, and sacrifice themselves for this, you know. So yeah, it does work, you know, it does work. And yeah, please try and understand that this is nothing artificial. It's actually the most common thing in any kind of spiritual setting and culture. And interestingly, I mean, Chowpatty is the model, of course, but actually Kirtananda started it, and he got the idea from a Christian group here in America. So it's not an Indian thing, you know, because sometimes people say, oh, that's an Indian thing, can only work in India. No, it's not. It comes from America, from some Christian sect. They take care of their congregational members like this. And that's where he got that, you know, yes, yes. And actually, when I visited New Vrindavan, you know, the more senior devotees, they remembered these days. Some 5-6 years ago, I gave the whole seminar there in New Vrindavan to the devotees. And they remembered, oh yeah, in the old days, we all had mentors. Yes, and Kirtananda was you know, encouraging it and, you know, so they remembered it, you know, yes, yes. And of course, the other thing that often people bring up is, or sometimes people say, oh, we tried that, too many problems. Well, let's be clear that the giving and accepting shelter relationship is turning our anarthas on both sides. So of course so many things will come up to the surface, but they're already in the heart. It's not that the mentorship idea brings them. No, the mentorship exposes it, you know. Same, by the way, in married life too, you know. So highly purifying, you know. It all comes up to the surface, or our attachments and demands and possessiveness and you know. So for both sides, for the mentor as well as the mentee, it's a whole purifying journey. So, and of course, some problems will be there. So that's why every mentor should also have a mentor, you know. So then the problems can be solved, you know. Yeah, so that's really important to understand, that it's nothing artificial. It should be the natural thing within spiritual culture, that those who are more experienced, they want to reach out, they want to guide, they want to sacrifice their energy for the upliftment of others, and those who are less experienced, they take guidance, they serve, they inquire. Should be the most natural thing, you know. But in materialistic society, not much room for it. That's the problem, and we are just so conditioned by it, you know, so conditioned. Yes, but really, I mean, I'm convinced that, we would have so many more devotees if we would take this seriously, you know. Yes. I remember once, some years ago, in San Diego, I visited, and I was also giving something here for more sessions than just two. And there was one Mataji, she told me afterwards, she said, yeah, some 15, 20 years ago, there was something happening, some conflict, and she stopped coming, even though she had done so much service before. And she told me not a single person rang her and asked, oh, where are you? We haven't seen you for a while, you know? Yes. And when I came there and visited, she had just come back after 10, 15 years, you know? And she could really relate to this. And she was saying, yeah, I was doing so much service in the DD department. Nobody rang, nobody asked what's happening, you know? Yeah, so these things don't happen when you have a mentor. Then everybody is caught in that net of care, you know? even the congregational members just the same. So if the mentor doesn't see the person for a couple of weeks, then of course they will ring. Hey, what's happening? How are you? Can I do something for you? And yes. And it's of course fantastic for newcomers, because you imagine coming first time to the temple, you don't know anybody. Maybe you are in a Western body, most people are in Indian body. Whew, you feel a little lost here, what's happening. So, but if there's, if you have different mentorship programs going on in different people's homes, Friday evening, Saturday evening, Sunday morning, and this address, that address, the other address, you make a pamphlet. So then your newcomers, you can tell, and you see a Western person coming, then you tell them, by the way, Saturday evening there's a nice group and that's at that address and they are all Western bodied and I'm sure, you will feel comfortable there and like that you can guide people immediately. You don't have to tell them that it's a mentorship thing and you need a mentor. No, of course not. But you just tell them that there's some home programs. Yeah, because home programs are fantastic for cultivating congregation, because temple is always public, official, formal, But home programs, that's where you connect on a personal level.
Me and the beginning of my Krishna consciousness had a lot of home programs.
See, yes, it's great, and that's how you can pull in the newcomers to direct them to certain house programs. I mean, I know you catch them and have some program here for them, but that's also good. But then here you can guide them to the house program, yes. And then they are naturally in the group, they welcome a newcomer, they train them, I show you how to offer you food, how to set up an altar, because sometimes people come for years, and then when I visit their home, there's no pampara on the altar, and the people haven't been trained, yes. So, I mean, it's everything falls into place, yes. And it's a question of making the time, that's the main way how a householder preaches, with house programs, yes, yes. It's one of the duties of the grihasta to receive guests and feed them. There's a purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita where Prabhupada says, when he thinks back of his childhood, there was not a single day where his parents did not minimum receive 4 guests for prasadam. Minimum, not a single day. Meaning some days 8 or 10, but never less than 4. Yeah. That's how you practically demonstrate that we have to serve the devotees. So how do you serve? By opening your home and feeding them. Yes. But in the Western world, who does it? Nobody, people don't know. Yeah, they don't know how to apply the philosophy. All right, anything else? Yes, last question.
Thank you. So you spoke now about the mentorship within the local community, but can it be a long-distance mentorship?
Can it be a long-distance mentorship? I always say there can be room for different mentors on different levels, but a local person should also be there, because as we said, if you're far away, you cannot see whether your practice is balanced, how you cooperate with others, what's your service mood, your sadhana, you cannot see. So, you can have several mentors on several levels. And even within one community, one mentor may not fulfill all needs, so to speak. With some things you may go to that person, with other things you may go to this person. So you can create your body of mentors there if you can't find everything in one person. And then there can be additional mentors further away, But ideally, one person should be there local. Yes. And then maybe more complicated and intricate things you keep for a person who is further away or something, you know. Yes. Okay. All right, thank you so much for your kind attention, and I hope it gives some little inspiration. I mean, you can start it amongst the brahmacharis first, you know, because naturally everybody stays within their own ashram. And even unmarried people, unmarried men who want to become married eventually soon, then they should take a grihastha mentor who guides you towards the right ashram, you know. Also brahmacharis should actually take married women as mentors because they guide us in the right direction, and renunciates should take often renunciates, you know, at the later stage of grihastha life we should move towards the vanaprastha ashram, so we should take a mentor of that stage of life and so on, you know. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki Swami Vivedhananda ki Gaura Premanandi.